Welcome to the season finale of Inside the GMAT. I'm your host, Zach, and on today's special episode, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. There's no guest joining me today because, well, you're the guest. Whether you're brand new to the GMAT or deep into your prep, this episode is designed with you in mind. We're going to be breaking down everything you've ever wanted to know about the GMAT exam, from what's actually on the test, to how it's scored, to what you can expect on test day. So if you've got GMAT questions, I've got GMAT answers in more ways than one. This is the GMAT Explained. Since its launch in 1954, the GMAT has been the gold standard in business school admissions and has continued evolving to ensure it remains a highly relevant indicator of candidate preparedness for graduate programs. Over the years, we at GMAC have worked collaboratively with B-School admissions professionals, faculty, and other partners to determine how to ensure it remains the best assessment for business education, with the goal to make sure you are ready for the academic rigor of a graduate management program. That brings us to the GMAT today. The GMAT is 2 hours and 15 minutes long and has 64 questions across 3 sections, each 45 minutes long: quantitative reasoning, verbal reasoning, and data insights. These sections test problem solving, critical thinking, and data literacy skills, respectively. More on that later in the episode. The exam is delivered at both test centers and online. While there are differences in availability and scheduling, the GMAT exam is exactly the same no matter how you take it. 64 questions, 3 sections, 2 hours, and 15 minutes. The test center exam and online exam have the exact same content, scoring, and reporting. While all exams are challenging, the GMAT has some features built in to make it as stress-free a testing experience as possible. Question Review and Edit allows you to review the questions you answered within each section and change up to 3 responses, or answers. With Select Section Order, you can take the exam and the 10-minute optional break in any order you want. And lastly, to make the GMAT exam broadly accessible, accommodations are available for test takers who meet certain eligibility criteria and properly document their request. Question Review and Edit aims to add flexibility to your exam experience. In each section, you can bookmark questions that you answered that you'd like to review later. Then, at the end of each section, with your remaining time, you can edit your answers whether you bookmark them or not. Also, it's important to note there is one limitation. You can only change up to 3 answer responses per section. Select Section Order allows further personalization of your testing experience. The 3 sections and the 1 break can be completed in any of 6 possible orders. Personally, I would start with verbal and then maybe do data insights and then quant. What would you choose first? Let me know in the episode comments. The 10-minute break can be taken either after the first section or after the second section. But remember, the 10 minutes is inclusive of the time it takes to check back into the exam. Candidates in need of accommodation can definitely apply for additional break time if necessary. Other available accommodations include extended testing time, assistive technology, and access to personal medical devices and other resources. Now let's talk about GMAT scores. GMAT scores carry significant weight in business school admissions. A solid GMAT score not only demonstrates you are ready and committed to pursuing an MBA or business master's, but a competitive score can also boost admissions odds and scholarship opportunities. The GMAT total score is on a scale of 205 to 805 and is based on your performance on all 3 sections of the exam, with each section weighted equally. Your score is also valid for 5 years, giving you the flexibility to take the exam and send your score to schools when you're ready. Your GMAT score is calculated based on the characteristics like difficulty of the questions you answer correctly, the characteristics of the questions you answer incorrectly, and the number of questions you leave unanswered. Each section of the GMAT is question adaptive. This means that the test chooses from a large bank of questions to adjust itself to your ability level based on how you answer each question. But remember, computer adaptive tests get harder as you answer more questions right. However, getting a question that seems easier than the last doesn't always mean your previous answer was wrong. The exam must ask many types of questions on different subjects, so it will not always give you a question of the perfect difficulty level. And lastly, All questions are important. Since the final score of each section is based on the total number of correct answers, the level of difficulty and other characteristics of the questions, and how many you actually answered, don't leave any questions blank. If you're familiar with the previous version of the GMAT exam, 10th edition, which was sunset in early 2024, you'll notice the total score scale is different from the current edition, which was launched as the GMAT exam Focus Edition. This change has been made to ensure you and schools can easily distinguish scores between the two versions. The score scale for the current exam, the Focus Edition, has also been adjusted to reflect changes in the test-taking population. Over the years, scores have shifted significantly, resulting in an uneven distribution. The updated score scale fixes that, thus allowing schools to better evaluate your performance on the exam. On the old GMAT, many test takers aimed for a score of 700. On the current GMAT, a score of 645 is roughly equivalent to a 700, due to that new score scale. Therefore, while scores may look quote-unquote lower in comparison, they aren't. The GMAT is scored differently now, and business schools know this when reviewing your application, and they're paying more attention to your percentile ranking than your actual total score anyway. Percentile rankings indicate what percentage of test takers you performed better than. For example, a percentile ranking of 72% means that you performed better than 72% of other test takers, and only 28% of test takers performed better than you. Official scores that are sent to you and schools include your total score and percentile ranking, as well as each 3 section scores and their percentiles. But listeners, remember, you do not need a perfect score to get into business school. Admissions officers evaluate your entire application and decide based on the whole of your materials. If there's one thing you remember from this episode, please, please, please let it be that. Lastly, I want to debunk some common myths out there about scoring. None of the myths I'm about to recite are true. My score will be negatively impacted if I take longer to answer a question. False. My score will be worse if I get the first or second question of a section wrong. False. If I change a question from correct to incorrect during the question review and edit part of the section, that will be weighted more heavily than getting it incorrect within the initial response. False. If I'm running out of time in a section, it is better to leave the question blank than guess an answer. False. Certain question types are weighted more heavily than other question types. False. None of these myths are true. All right, now that we've got scoring covered, let's get into the meat of the GMAT. It's 3 sections. If you're not listening to this episode during your commute or on a run, it could be helpful to download the free GMAT official starter kit from MBA.com so you can follow along with some practice questions. First up, Quant. The quantitative reasoning section of the exam presents 21 questions that measure algebraic and arithmetic foundational knowledge and how a test taker applies this knowledge to solve problems. Some problems are contextualized in real-life settings, while others are presented in pure mathematical form. Calculator use is prohibited, but all the math needed is generally taught in high school. In fact, here is the mathematical knowledge that is expected. For arithmetic, we're looking at elementary operations, value order and factors, ratios, rates, and percents, basic descriptive statistics such as mean, median, mode, range, and standard deviation, and counting methods. For algebra, we've got algebraic expressions and manipulations, solving equations and inequalities, modeling and solving word problems with algebra, and elementary probability, sequences, and partial sums. I'm sure many of these topics are familiar to you. I studied theater in my undergrad, and they are even familiar to me. And lastly, no geometry knowledge is expected. All of the problem-solving questions are traditional multiple-choice questions with 5 answer choices, of which you must select one. At the end of the day, these questions rely on logic and analytical skills, not necessarily the underlying math skills. And here are some of my general quant tips and tricks. So, number 1, pace yourself and don't take too long double-checking answers. You have roughly 2 minutes, 9 seconds per question. Scan all answer choices before working on the problem. If a problem doesn't show a diagram, drawing one on your own may be helpful. And don't waste time on a problem that's too hard. Take an educated guess and come back to it later if you have time. Okay, now let's take a math break and move on to verbal reasoning. The verbal reasoning section of the exam has 23 questions that test critical reasoning and reading comprehension skills. Critical reasoning questions test the ability to analyze and evaluate complex scenarios and draw logical inferences, arguments, or solutions. Reading comprehension questions test the ability to recognize and understand ideas and draw inferences from information presented in passages. The passages in this section pertain to many different topics, but the good news is that no specific knowledge of any topic is required. I actually took a practice test a small bit ago, and I got a question on types of frogs, I think, if I remember correctly. And the only frog I know about is Kermit. The question format in this section is also traditional multiple choice questions with 5 answer choices, of which you must select one. Reading comp questions measure your ability to understand words and statements, understand logical relationships between significant points, draw inferences, and follow the development of concepts. Specifically, the following reading skills will be tested: main idea, supporting idea, inference, application, logical structure, and style. One of the best strategies is to read every answer choice before making your selection. Personally, I like to read the answers before I even read the passage. Also, make sure you're not misled by answer choices that are only partially true or only partially answer the question. Some questions will ask about the meaning of a word used in a passage, but make sure you select the answer that represents the way the word is actually being used. As we all know, many words have multiple meanings depending on the context. Next up, critical reasoning questions measure your ability to make arguments, evaluate arguments, and formulate or evaluate a plan of action. Critical reasoning questions are based on a short reading passage, usually fewer than 100 words. Typically, the short text comes with a question that asks which of the 5 answer options strengthens or weakens an argument, tells why the argument is flawed, or strongly supports or damages the argument. Again, you will not need specialized knowledge of the subject matter to answer the questions. For these questions, a good strategy is to read the statement first, then all of the answer choices before making a selection, sort of opposite to what I said about reading comprehension. Also, pay close attention to what is put forward as factual information, what is not said but necessarily follows from what is said, what is claimed to follow from facts that have been put forward, and how well those claims are substantiated. When reading arguments, determine how sound the reasoning is. It is not necessary to pass judgment on the actual truth of anything put forward as fact. And if a question is based on an argument, identify what part of the argument its conclusion is. That will help determine if a passage uses good reasoning. Last but certainly not least, we have data insights. The Data Insights section measures your ability to analyze and interpret data and apply it to real-world business scenarios. It also measures digital and data literacy, which is one of the most relevant and in-demand skills in business today. It is composed of 20 questions that ask you to assess how multiple sources and types of information, including graphic, numeric, and verbal, relate to one another and can be leveraged to make informed decisions. Questions may require math, data analysis, verbal reasoning, or all 3. And some good news, you can use an on-screen calculator while working on this section. These 20 questions are comprised of 5 different question types, so let's get into each of them. First up, data sufficiency. Data sufficiency questions measure your ability to analyze a problem, recognize which data is relevant, and determine at what point there is enough data to solve the problem. People overall really like these questions, I think because the answer choices are always the same. These are my favorite, actually. That leads me to my number 1 strategy, which is memorize these 5 answer choices and what they mean. They are: Statement 1 alone is sufficient, but Statement 2 alone is not sufficient. Statement 2 alone is sufficient, but Statement 1 alone is not sufficient. Both statements together are sufficient, but neither statement alone is sufficient. Each statement alone is sufficient, or statements 1 and 2 together are not sufficient. My second tip is to remember you are only determining whether you have enough data to solve the problem, not actually solving the problem. And lastly, avoid making unwarranted assumptions based on pictures or figures. They're not necessarily drawn to scale. Next, we have multi-source reasoning questions. These measure your ability to examine data from multiple sources, including text passages, tables, graphics, or some combination of the three, and to analyze each source of data carefully to answer multiple questions. Some questions are traditional multiple choice with 5 answer choices. Others are conditional statement questions, where you determine which statements are true or false. You must mark all parts of the question correctly, though, to receive credit. When it comes to these questions, don't expect to be completely familiar with the material. Like other question types, all of the information you need to answer the questions is provided. Also, analyze each source of data carefully, as the questions require detailed understanding of the data presented. Text passages often build ideas in sequences, so be mindful of how each statement adds to the main idea of the passage, and graphic elements come in various forms such as tables, graphs, diagrams, or charts. Some questions will require recognizing discrepancies among different sources of data. Others will ask you to draw inferences or require you to determine which one of the data sources is relevant. Lastly, select the answer choices that have the most support based on the data provided. Don't let your knowledge of the subject matter influence your answer choice. Answer the questions using only what is provided to you. Thirdly, we have table analysis questions, which measure your ability to sort and analyze a table of data similar to a spreadsheet to determine what information is relevant or meets certain conditions. And yes, we did the unthinkable. We combined spreadsheets with test taking. Fortunately, you will not have to code a pivot table on the GMAT exam. Like multi-source reasoning, questions are in conditional statement form where you determine which statements are true or false. You must mark all parts of the question correctly to receive credit. For these questions, examine the table and accompanying text to determine the type of information provided, not necessarily the values themselves. Also, of course, read the question carefully to determine the data analysis required, and know the choices you have to make by reviewing the answers. And finally, judge each answer statement carefully based on the conditions specified, like yes or no, true or false. Focus your attention on whether the given condition has been met. Moving on, 2-part analysis questions measure your ability to solve complex problems. They could be quantitative, verbal, or some combination of both. The format is intentionally versatile to cover a wide range of content, so your ability to evaluate trade-offs, solve simultaneous equations, and discern relationships between two entities is measured. These are kind of like little puzzles. To get the question right, you need to make 2 choices that together or separately meet one or more conditions. As far as my main strategies go, I know we've said this before, but don't let any familiarity with the subject matter influence your response. Only use the data presented in the question. On the quant-based questions, check your work as you go, as there are often several ways to solve the problem, just like in a real-world business setting, but there is only one right answer. And on verbal-based questions, the prompt often gives more information than necessary, so definitely focus on what is being asked and don't get burdened by extra stuff. And finally, we have graphics interpretation questions. These measure your ability to interpret the information presented in a graph or other graphical image, like a scatter plot or a pie chart, to discern relationships and make inferences. It's important to note here you must mark all parts of the question correctly to receive credit as well. As far as general strategies go, try not to get overwhelmed by the graphical display and just take direction from the question. Read any accompanying text carefully. The text might present data that isn't contained in the graphic, but you need to answer the question. Read all of the choices in the drop-down menus. By checking the menu options, you will get additional information about your assigned task. And more than one option in the drop-down menu may seem plausible, but you will need to choose the one that makes the statement most accurate or logical. Those are the question types you'll find on Data Insights. I know it sounds like a lot, and it is, but as someone who has gone to business school, I will say that these questions are the most like the ones that you get on tests and homework assignments, especially if you're doing Harvard Business Review cases. If you want a real edge in business school, honestly, whether you take the GMAT or not, practice these question types. This is not a marketing pitch. I mean this. Okay, so now that I've shared all that, what are my top overall prep tips? Number 1, become familiar with question formats and the directions beforehand. Number 2, be aware of time. Do not waste any time on questions you find extremely difficult. Number 3, make sure you understand what each question is asking by reading each question thoroughly and reading all answer choices before locking in your final answer. Number 4, answer every question, even if you just make an educated guess. Number 5, while this doesn't apply to all question types, Use the knowledge you have already to figure out answers to unfamiliar questions. And of course, this podcast is no replacement for actual studying. Like I mentioned before, on MBA.com, you can download our free GMAT official starter kit, which includes 2 full-length practice exams and more than 70 practice questions. And that would be your best next step for prepping for the GMAT and getting even more tips and tricks. Now let's pretend we've already taken the GMAT. In some ways, I do kind of feel like we just did, but here's how we would access our results and send them to business schools. Immediately after the exam, you will see your unofficial score. This will include your score and percentile ranking for all 3 sections and, of course, your total score. You're not allowed to record, save, or print from this screen. But don't worry, you won't have to wait long because official scores are sent your way within 3 to 5 days in most circumstances. Included in your GMAT registration is the option to send your official score report to up to 5 programs for free within a 48-hour period. After this period, or if you want to send your score to more programs, you can send additional score reports for a fee. This can all be done from your account on MBA.com. When a school receives your score, which they typically will within 8 hours of being sent, it's just one page that includes your basic personal information like your name and address, and the score or scores you chose to send. It doesn't include a photo of yourself, nor does it include all of the detailed performance insights you receive as part of your exam results. Submitted scores include your exam date, appointment ID, delivery channel, so test center or online, total score and percentile ranking, and section scores and percentile rankings. Submitted scores do not include if you had testing accommodations. Okay, so now I'm going to answer some of the most common questions that we receive about score sending. Number 1, do I have to pick my recipient schools before starting the exam? Nope. You select your schools after you receive your official score report. How can I cancel my score? It's actually no longer possible or necessary to cancel scores. Instead of canceling scores, you just have the flexibility to pick and choose which scores to send or not send. 3, if I've taken the GMAT more than once, will all my scores be visible to schools? The only exam attempts that will be included in your school-facing score report are the scores that you opt to share. 4, can I download a copy of my score report? There is no formal printout. You can print the pages on your My Account profile, but that's not considered an official score that can be sent to or received by schools. 5, should I send my score if I'm not happy about it? Yes, roughly 30% of test takers don't send their score for various reasons. Let schools review your entire application. Don't self-select out of the running. And here's another big question. Should I test again? Well, that's up to you. You can take the GMAT 5 times in a rolling 12-month period, though you need to allow 16 days between testing times, and there is no lifetime limit on GMAT attempts. I will say research found that taking the exam more than once can increase your score by 20 to 30 points, but you need to make the best choice for where you are in the application process, and hopefully you've built in time to retest if necessary. As I mentioned earlier, included in your GMAT registration is an improved official score report, which features detailed performance insights. These are insights that are only available to you and they're not sent to schools. Performance by section provides an overview of total score, section scores, and percentile rankings for each. Performance by program and school shows how your total score percentile ranking compares to the percentile ranking of candidates who sent their GMAT scores to the same program within the past 5 years. So this is really useful. You can see how you stack up against other folks who are interested in the same programs. But note that this chart will only display if you send your official scores to one or more programs, so I highly recommend taking advantage of it. Now, for each section of the exam, you'll get performance by content domain, question type, and fundamental skill. Performance by content domain, or content type, shows percentile rankings based on the most recent 5 years of data for each content domain within a section. This chart can help identify strengths and opportunities for improvement. Performance by question type shows percentile ranking based on the most 5 recent years of data for each question type within the section. And performance by fundamental skills shows percentile ranking based on the most recent 5 years of data for each fundamental skill within the section. There's also time management and question review and edit data. So time management and performance shows response time, including any review time, for each question within a section. This can be used to see how you're pacing yourself and how that correlates with your performance. The summary of question review and edit changes shows review activity for a section, including how much time was spent reviewing and editing questions. Whether you choose to retest or not, take advantage of this report because it can give you insights on how to become a better, stronger studier. Next, let's talk about the actual testing experience and what to expect on test day. I'm going to be going over some of the policies and procedures at a very high level, but all of the must-read, must-sign details are on MBA.com. So, if you're taking the exam at a test center, there are key actions you need to take before your exam appointment to ensure your test day goes smoothly. In order to take the GMAT at a test center, there is one item you absolutely must bring, which is an acceptable and valid ID with your name, signature, and photograph. Your ID must match your registration exactly, or you will not be able to take the test. In addition to your ID, you're also allowed to bring your appointment confirmation email, prescription eyeglasses, a light sweater or jacket, or any permitted comfort items as part of any approved accommodations you received. Every test center will also have a locker available for you to use as well. It's to store your phone and other personal belongings that are not allowed with you while taking the test. In terms of what you can't bring, that would be food, drink, candy. It's not allowed unless it's expressly pre-authorized as an accommodation. And of course, no weapons of any kind or any object that could be used as a weapon. Of course. I know that right before taking an exam, anxiety can really set in. That's why I want to share exactly what happens before the exam starts so you can mentally prepare. At a test center, before you start the test, you'll be asked to present your ID and do other security measures. The test administrator will then provide you with 5 erasable noteboards for you to take notes with throughout the exam. They'll then show you to your seat, where the rest is in your control. Don't let the formality of any of these security procedures spook you or add any additional pressure to test day. While, of course, the content is exactly the same, the process of getting ready to take the exam online is a little different from that at a test center. One thing that is the same, though, is the importance of having your official ID. Also, instead of being provided with note-taking materials, you're permitted to have your own as long as they follow the exact specs laid out in our policies and procedures. Other than the approved whiteboard, 2 dry erase markers, and eraser, you can't have anything else with you, such as pens, pencils, or paper. Also, there are detailed system requirements you must meet in order to take the exam online. If you don't meet these requirements, you won't be able to take the test. These include computer, microphone and speaker, and camera requirements. You'll also need to perform a system check on your computer before scheduling your test. And here are some things to keep in mind before your online exam starts. Run a final systems check and download and install the secure web browser needed to take the exam on. Also, preemptively close all browsers and apps not needed for the test. You can also help the room scan move along by removing all prohibited items and ensuring your power source. Lastly, log in at least 15 minutes before your scheduled appointment time to allow for a leisurely, stress-free check-in process. Again, you can and you must review all the details of testing online at MBA.com. This podcast does not count as having agreed to the policies and procedures. Even though I'm the host, I do not have that such power. Lastly, in addition to a physical whiteboard, the online exam has a built-in whiteboard, which is a surprisingly powerful tool with several useful features applicable to a wide range of exam question types. It sort of looks like old school Microsoft Paint, but trust me, it's more sophisticated than it appears, really. Some online whiteboard strategies pan and zoom for unlimited workspace, favor the undo over erase or clear options, use the whiteboard to create a time management grid, or use text boxes and the keyboard instead of writing by hand. Also, utilize the Shapes tool to make or replicate boxes, grids, Venn diagrams, and reduce mouse speed for more control and precision. You can actually try out the online whiteboard in the official starter kit free practice exams or in the other practice exams that you can pay for. And there you have it. Everything you ever wanted to know about the GMAT exam, and maybe a little more. I know I covered a lot today, from how the exam is structured to how it's scored, what to expect on test day, some prep tips. So whether you're just beginning your journey or you're already studying, I hope this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of what you can expect and what's possible. Just remember that your GMAT score is one part of your application. You don't need a perfect score to get into a great program. But preparing for the GMAT can give you a serious edge, both in the admissions process and once you're in the classroom. To dig deeper into the resources that I shared, of course, go to mba.com. You can also go there to register for the GMAT exam. I think you're ready now. If you found this episode helpful, I'd love it if you subscribed, or left a quick review, or shared it with somebody who's considering the GMAT exam. Thank you for being here and for being the guest on this special episode. I'm Zach at GMAC, and I'll see you next season on Inside the GMAT. Until then.